when you're in hockey, and even for someone like me, you take for granted just the athleticism that it takes to be in that. And you guys are really the top 1% in the world at what you do, period. And, that barrier of entry is so challenging. I think it's taken for granted a lot of times, just how hard you guys really work.
That was Scott Tinkler, former associate equipment manager of the Florida Panthers from 1993 until 2005. And you are listening to the Up My Hockey podcast with Jason Podolak.
Just watch me now.
Welcome to Up My Hockey with Jason Podolak, where we deconstruct the NHL journey, discuss what it takes to make it, and have a few laughs along the way. I'm your host, Jason Podolak, a 31st overall draft pick who played 41 NHL games, but thought he was destined for 1,000. Learn from my story and those of my guests. This is a hockey podcast about reaching your potential. Welcome back, or welcome to the Up My Hockey podcast with Jason Podolak. I am your host, Jason Podolak, and I'm excited today because I'm going to bring you a guest from a line in the hockey world, like a job in the hockey world that I have not covered yet. I mean, I've had a ref on the podcast, and Tom Cowell. I've had NHL GMs on, like Ken Holland, and coaches and assistant coaches and players and scouts and director of hockey development, and I've had all of those types of people on, but I have yet to have an equipment manager on. And today is the day we're going to talk to Scott Tinkler. And Scott Tinkler, he's one of those names. I think his name, first of all, is amazing. Tinkler. His nickname was Tink. He was just such a fun guy to be around in the locker room in Florida when I was there. And he was just one of the guys to me. Like he was one of the boys. He would do anything for you. He'd get you, he'd grab you a towel, or he'd get your skates done, or he'd grab your equipment if it needed repair and get it to the guy who could do that. And he was just the guy that could get you stuff. That's what Tink was. And he was just, he did his best to make sure the players were happy and taken care of. And he was a young man himself when he was in Florida. I think he might have been 23, 24 years old, something like that. I was 20, so it wasn't like he had, he was an elder statesman and long in the tooth when it came to his job. He was there. He was young. He was fresh, and so he was very relatable to someone like me. And he reached out to me on LinkedIn. I've been doing some posting on LinkedIn about Up My Hockey and the podcast, and he reached out and congratulated me on what I had going on. And I was like, oh my gosh, after all these years, Tink reaches out, and and he's still involved with Florida. And I'm like, what a great guest Tink would be. Like what goes on behind the scenes that the average hockey fan doesn't know, and even the average hockey player doesn't know unless you've been in the NHL, like how that works and those inner workings, and how much we rely on those guys in the locker room, like Tink, to have things ready, to have things prepared. And in Florida was a zoo with where the practice rink was, and getting equipment shuttled all over the place, and making sure everyone's gear was set up and in place. And long, hard hours, and they did a lot of work and made our lives, super, super easy when it came to what they had to do to make sure that we were ready for games. And Tink was always involved in the stories, and he was always involved in the jokes, and I just thought that he'd be a really fun guest, and it turned out that he was an absolutely phenomenal guest. We relived the 96 run to the final. For anyone who's a Florida Panther fan or a hockey fan at all that remembers that glorious run, it was the year of the Rat. And we cover what an instrumental role Tink played in the year of the Rat. And if you're not familiar with that story, my goodness, you have to listen to the episode and hear Tink talk about the Rat and the Rat trick. And we talk about Brian Scrudlin and his antics, and Lindy Ruff and what an amazing human he was, and the part he played in that team, and John Van Beesbrook, who was really the backbone of that entire run. And we had a great conversation. Really, we had a great conversation. We covered his rise and his ability to get involved in the sport, and the challenges that he had, and talking about the personalities and dealing with the personalities and understanding what the wins and losses mean, and when's a joke's okay, and when you're allowed to smile, and when you're allowed to laugh, and when you should just shut up, and all that good stuff, and the connection to the players and the connection to the coach. We get into some stories about what the players on that team were able to do for the training staff and the steps that they would go to. And anyways, I mean, it goes on and in a good way. Like I could talk to Scott all day. He's a really easy guy to be around. Got a real great big heart. He cared about the guys that he worked with, and I think the guys that he worked for cared for him, and that comes through loud and clear in this episode. And they really are the pieces of the team that keep the team together and keep things rolling. And I know they're not underappreciated, like as far as the players in the locker room. The staff there that makes things tick are very well respected and very taken care of, I believe, in any team that I was on. But as far as the casual fan or maybe from outside the locker room, it's not something that you really give much thought to or much credit for, those guys behind the scenes that are making it work. But they're definitely massively required, and they really are a big piece of the culture of the team. And Scott Tinkler was a big part of the culture of the Florida Panthers and their success there early on. I truly believe that. He was one of the good guys in the game, and I was really happy to see that he was able to come on to share his stories with you. I'm sure you'll get a laugh here. And he's still involved with the alumni today, with the Florida Panther alumni today. So I have the good fortune of being able to reconnect with him a couple more times here, hopefully in the future. And I'm excited. You guys get to hear about an equipment manager for an NHL team. You get to hear some behind-the-scenes stories, what it's all about. Get to have a few good laughs, and I give you my conversation with Scott Tinkler. Very, very friendly face and somebody I remember fondly, but welcome to the program, Mr. Scott Tinkler.
Thank you, Podsy. It's a pleasure to be here, and I appreciate this opportunity to speak with you again.
Yeah, man, it was a super, like, for me, doing what I'm doing now, like one of the coolest things about it has been the reconnections. Like totally, like I rank that right up at the top. And then, being on social media, there are days where I absolutely want to shove a rusty fork in my neck because of it. But there are also great days where someone like you will reach out on LinkedIn and say, hey, like whatever. And it's just reconnection. And that now we're talking and we're getting to kind of rehash some old memories. So I am thankful for that. And thank you for reaching out on LinkedIn and saying hi in the first place.
Absolutely. And you're doing a great job with that, by the way. I'm very happy for you and what you're doing. It's fantastic.
Oh, well, thanks. I mean, it's, I guess it's needed. You know what I mean? Sometimes you don't even know what you're doing when you start. And when I started, it was one of those things where it was like a reflection of my own career. I was brought back to it because of my boys, right? Like, I was out of the game. I mean, I wasn't doing anything. I was in business. I was in the corporate world. I was doing what I was doing. And then my boys started playing hockey. And then so I started, I'm around the rinks now, and I'm around the junior players, and now I'm around the stories. And it makes you sort of reflect on what the hell happened to you. And anyways, as life happens full circle, it's like, well, geez, I should be probably trying to help because there is room to help, especially in the space that I wanted to step into. And there's definitely been momentum, obviously not just without my hockey, but just in general, like the mental health space and how do you develop players the best and how do you support them to grow? And there's so many new ideas that weren't around, quite frankly, when I was hanging out with you in '96.
That's right. Yeah.
So thank you for that, and thank you for being a supporter of it and willing to come on. But I'm sure we'll get into a lot of stuff here today. But let's start with you, and maybe like the coolest thing for me is like, and probably one of the reasons why I so fondly remember you. Well, one, because you were a fantastic guy and a great human just to work with, but it was such an exciting time, right? Like, I got called up to Florida. I had been drafted, so I'd met you at the camp the year before, so there was an introduction. But then I got called up for the playoff run, and we were playing Boston at the time, and then I was with the group, right, for the next whatever that was, 2-month run or whatever.
Yeah, that's right.
Like, let's go back to that moment in time. Like you, I assume you were a bit new to hockey. Maybe we should even start there. Let's go a step backward, because how did you get to be a part of the Florida Panthers? This new franchise in the NHL in Southern Florida. Like, how did you become a part of that?
Well, I was pretty fortunate. Timing played a major role in that. But I was out of the Marine Corps. I was in the Marines from '88 to '92, and I got out. And the teams actually was awarded, I believe, to Mr. Huizinga in December of '93, December of '92. I apologize. And they were going to start playing '93. Well, I was helping my stepfather, Neil Goodman, was very close with the Miami Heat trainers and this, that, and the other. So when they brought down when Bobby Clark came here with Sudsy Settlemar was our first equipment manager, and his son Derek was going to be the truck driver. They asked if they knew anybody who knew the area around here. I was in the process of becoming a police officer, and I was like, sure. In the interim, I had taken a job selling tickets, just as an intern type scenario, just to try to get my feet wet. And then I was denied a full-time job initially, so I had impressed Bill Beck, who was one of the first team services people, and he said, "Come on in." So I did, and I did really well on that side. I had a passion for the game. I grew up kind of watching it. It was hard down here in South Florida, but once I got cable, I was following the Devils was actually my team. So it just kind of happened one thing after another. I went down there, and next thing you know, I was asked to see helping out Derek, and then there was a role for a position that kind of helped out in that short term, and it turned into a year, a contract basically. And then Derek and Sudsy left to Philly with Bobby Clark. Our second year, we had Brian Murray come in and Mark Brennan, and Timmy Leroy was here. He was here as an associate as well. And so it was the three of us that really kind of took off from that point. So then I started doing team services and things in addition to the equipment side of it. So I had a pretty good background. And by that time, then, here we are, our third year. My second year was the first lockout. It was a shorter one. It was the start of the season. And we only played half a year, the second year. We had a great run our first year. We were only 1 point out of the playoffs. And what a phenomenal ensemble they had. It was Brian Murray, it was Bill Torrey. It was Bobby Clark, and it was Roger Nielsen was our first coaches. I mean, that's a hell of a staff to start with in this market. Wayne Huizinga, the owner of Blockbuster, he owned the Dolphins and he owned the Marlins at the time too. So it was a whole environment down here. And he had the mantra, like he didn't know anything about hockey, but he wanted to hire the best people for the game. And he knew those guys, and he certainly that resume of guys. So it started out like that and just materialized. And ultimately, I learned a lot on the ropes. I was fortunate that I started at this level, very grateful compared to some of the guys that had to work in the minors and this and that. But again, it was just timing. It wasn't,
right.
And sometimes in life that really is, it doesn't matter kind of where you start, it's where you finish. And it worked out at the time. So that's sort of how it materialized and became an integral part of that team for a long, long time.
So you did have a penchant for hockey and an interest in it,
Sure.
but not firsthand knowledge or inner sort of workings of what would be going on, what turned out to be your future job for a long time. Correct?
That's correct. I thought, if it didn't work out the first year, I was 22, I could go be a cop, still, it wasn't a big deal. That's a very common course for a former Marine or military to go civil service, whether it's police or firefighter. And I figured, okay, I'll get this hockey a real kick in the can. If I could do it, great. And if not, I just go back to trying to be a cop again. And fortunately, it worked out really, really well, even beyond my expectations. I was very happy to be part of that.
That's fantastic. So what was so you take us back to the first couple of days, what was the feeling? I mean, I would assume, and because I'm the mindset guy, there must have been a little bit of imposter syndrome going on. I don't know what the hell I'm doing, right? I'm working with these guys that have been playing hockey their whole lives, and I'm supposed to be doing their equipment. Was there that hurdle to get over? It
was definitely a culture shock. I mean, again, it's a tough job. Obviously, you're working really long hours, and the commitment level has got to be one of that. Your family kind of, as I mean, you played it, the game. I mean, so for me, it was kind of a little bit of an adjustment, but thankfully I was not that far from the Marine Corps, believe it or not. So I was sort of apt for the long days and short nights and sleeping on couches and all the things required, especially for a new franchise. There's no expectations. So there's no history. So you're going in, and thankfully I had mentors like Sudsy and Timmy and Derek, who had been around the game and knew the game. And ultimately, the people that were around, Brian Scrudlins of the world and the Lindy Ruffs of the world and the Roger Nielsens of the world, the people that took us under and really showed a true affinity for the support staff and made me feel very welcome. So, clearly I had a lot to learn, and I learned on the fly, but it was more about just the understanding what was required and being around the room and understanding that as well. You learn the guys, you learn what to say, kind of not what to say, and just who's a little more approachable than guys that aren't. And you have to respect these guys are getting an opportunity to play at the top level and they have their own mind process about where they're at. And uniqueness of an expansion is, from the guys that were taken, they were basically, respectfully not necessarily wanted by their original franchises. So there's that level. Then you had other guys that were coming to camp too. So we were all just sort of, in a new market, in a never before would there have thought of being hockey down in Miami. So the expectation level was high, but there was nothing to really compare it to other than where it was. And again, having a Sudsy as an experienced guy, knowing what to do, and all his years in Philadelphia really translated well to us young guys, me, myself, and Timmy and Derek really helped us along. So that was kind of what it was. And then again, learning as you go, learning the systems, but we all had to do it together because there was nothing really in place. It was what worked, what didn't work, and take it from there. And obviously you want to pull away from what doesn't and focus on what does and move from there.
What was your role specifically? I know, we have it flashing across the screen, associate equipment manager, but for those of the listeners listening at home, like what does that mean, or what did your day look like?
Well, clearly, initially it was more of task orientated in terms of getting the equipment up, transferring around, the laundry, the towels, room preparation, all the things associated with that level. The real entry level equipment side, getting a cup or gloves or this, that, and the other, nothing to do with the actual equipment repair. That sort of came later as I learned the job. That's where the associate came in. I learned how to I didn't know how to sharpen skates. Clearly, it was something I learned doing there. I didn't know how to sew gloves. I was taught that. So you learn your craft, and that's where I initially I was, basically just, they call you an equipment manager, but you're just sort of the third and fourth guy running around the room, doing stuff, moving this, setting the rooms up, breaking it down after, getting the Gatorades, the benches, stuff like that. Very entry level stuff. But valuable stuff. And you have to have someone who's reliable and shows up and does the stuff and helping out with the visiting teams when necessary at that role. And ultimately getting the opportunity to travel, which I'd never in a million years thought I'd be able to do. And I was doing team services as well, where Marnie Scher, our old team service manager, was home. I was doing it on the road. I was the on-road contact. Did it without an internet, did it without a cell phone, did it without any type of real formal stuff. I was guessing and hoping the buses would be there. We flew commercial our first couple of years, so that was always a bit of a challenge, as you know. So, it evolved into more of a understanding the equipment, learning how to repair it, doing the skates at the rookie camps, and some of the guys that we did it. But Mark Brennan handled the majority of that, and Timmy did while he was here until he went to become the head guy at Columbus. Right. So then he did. Yeah, he was the head guy at Columbus up and through this start of this year. So he was there for 20-something years. So.
Really?
He was there the whole time. So he did really well with that. And this is his first year not being there, but he had a long, very, very respectful career and taught me a lot and remain very close to this day, obviously.
That's interesting. And just inside hockey, and I know the head coach there, Brad Larson in Columbus. He's from Vernon, actually.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah, nice. That is. But would that be like Lars's call that he's not there? Did he move on his own, or how does that work?
No, I think it was made his decision to do what he had to do. I think his contract was up, and he's been doing it for a long time, and he probably wanted to spend more time with his kids. And you do this a long time, it does start to, you can see the hours and the level of commitment is no different than when it was early in your career too. It's just that, your body changes, obviously, the equipment changes and the responsibilities, it becomes a little more technical. And I know that was part of the game that changed a lot, that he was telling me on, all the stuff with the after hours with the reporting and the ordering online. And that didn't exist. Emails didn't exist when we were first doing it. It was a lot different of a game. So, probably had enough of that level of it. So did his time and time to enjoy some life.
Cool. Well, good for Tim. Yeah, that's great to hear that he went on to the head job there in Columbus for such a long time. Absolutely. And that's probably interesting because we were talking about Scott Brennan before, like I pressed record here, and the name rang a bell. And then you kind of described how he looked, and now I do remember him. But the thing, it's such a blur, right? Especially me. I ended up being such a suitcase, and I was everywhere, and so many different, managers and trainers and everything else that it sometimes goes into a blender. But that makes sense why I do remember you so much more, because you were the guy that was in the room more, right? Like you were the guy that was doing the towels and, hey, Pods, you need a drink, or like that type of stuff. That's what you were doing at that time, right?
That's right. And if you needed skate sharpened, I'd bring him to Brennan, and then I'd come back and I'd walk out with the skates and bring him to there and bring it back to you. You needed gloves done, then I would leave them for him to do. And that was the system. We had a really good system together, he and I. We worked really well together with that.
Yeah, and then he was kind of like the man with the iron keys, I remember too, right? If you needed something, like he would kind of ask you, and then maybe you'd get it, maybe you wouldn't.
Yeah.
Him,
It
right?
was definitely a different type of thing. I called him MacGyver. He cut his teeth in the Western Hockey League, driving the bus at New Westminster, and it was very close with he had Craig Berube and he had Cliff Ronning and he had Mark Recchi, all those guys playing in the dub, and he drove the bus. So he had a really tight relationship with those guys, like Berube, like I said, and Ronning and Recchi, and then he went on to work in the American Hockey League at Detroit's minor league team. So he had all those guys like Probert and Stevie Y at Detroit. So he had and he was really, really good at what he did with that. So was Timmy, but Mark MacGyver, we call him. He was the guy that would find some way to fix the shoulder pads that you wanted. That was just amazing with equipment and really, really good at what he did.
Right. You mentioned, which is actually pretty cool that you mentioned it, like the psychology of like the job that you were doing, the requirement, because you had to have social awareness about, who wanted to talk or who wanted to be talked to or ask questions or however you wanted to put it. Was that sort of a learn on the job thing? Was that something that you were prepped for? Like, how did that go about?
Yeah, it's interesting. They, obviously, yeah, you do kind of learn on the fly. I can tell you that in my experience, John Van Beesbrook, as you know, was clearly one of the most intense, especially gay. Like, it's amazing the access that people have now compared to what it would have been then. And there's no way that the media would have, and it's not right, wrong, or different. I know it's what has evolved, but his own teammates basically stayed away from him on game day because that was his mental preparation. He's the goalie, and that's what he did. And he was just very much, to himself, and he didn't want to interact. That was his method, and you learned that. It wasn't negative, it wasn't personal. That was his mindset. That's what he did to prepare for the games, and you respect that. And where a guy like Skrudlin was a lot more laid back, and or Bill Lindsay or Niedermeyer, you kind of get away with a little more with those guys up until game time, and then that's their time, and how they want to handle the game. You respect that, and and you learn. You do learn on the fly pretty quickly who is approachable and who isn't, and so does everybody around you. It's not solely just it's the organization, and it's very commendable to see how the players would respect that. They wouldn't push the boundaries of that. And post game is different, obviously. Clearly, after a victory, it's all this and that. But after a loss, then you still have to learn who you kind of want to go near. The coaches. It's a real challenging minefield to navigate sometimes. You don't know what the reaction is going to be, and especially start hitting a couple games in a row, and all of a sudden, people start getting nervous. It's not the same environment, so it's clearly better to win. But it's sort of self-learning. And again, coming into a brand new franchise, I didn't have someone say, hey, watch out for that guy. He's not – you learned it. And we all learned it together because none of us had him prior to that. So we learned it as a staff. And Timmy was sort of his guy here, and that's who dealt with him. And that, if he called you, you'd breast him, but you didn't necessarily go to guys like that unless they wanted to communicate with you. They really they dictated who was going to they dictated the situation.
Meaning like a Beezer you're talking about.
And Beezer, or not goalies in general. Clearly, you still kind of they have their own method of thinking and doing so. But there were some other players that were intense too that you kind of stayed away from, or maybe more of a tough guy who knows his role is to go out there and punch faces or get his face punched. They may not be. They know there's a guy on the other side of the ice that they're going to have to go fight, and they prepare for that. So that's their method of doing it. If they want chat, they do. You just kind of, when you got to game time, you really just kind of let the guys do their own processes. Your job is to step back. That's where the coaches are out of there. That's really the players' area, and that's their main domain. And you respect their domain, and you stay out of there. You don't need to be hanging around there for that. That's something that really is sacred, for lack of a better term.
Right. Well, the Marine is no jokes. I mean, obviously there's an attitude about being a Marine and the day to day. So I mean, it's not too disconnected, I don't think, from professional sports in some aspects, but not being around it though, like from the grassroots level, right? I mean, it really changed for me in junior. Like when I went to play junior A at 15, and you're with these 20-year-olds, and now all of a sudden, like a loss. We're competitive, right? So, I mean, a loss matters regardless, but now it's like a different thing, right? And you're on the bus, and now 2 losses is a different thing. And now you're not allowed to have a movie on the bus because you've lost 2 in a row, or, so like there's a whole culture around winning's fun and losing's not, and
Absolutely.
I could imagine like stepping into that environment, like maybe a loss might have not meant what it would have meant to the other guys just because you've never really been through it yet, right?
Right.
So
That's right.
there's probably a little bit of novelty there, right, with the whole idea of professional sports. Did you ever remember a time where you kind of got your wrist slapped for maybe being too jovial or stepping in or doing something?
It was kind of funny. One time I felt like that was the kid had the note passed to him 30. The note went around 30 times. I'm the one who got caught with it, but it was in Miami Arena, and Doug McClain was the coach. I love Doug, and he was great. And Doug had a very big personality. And the coach's room was off, as you recall. There was, that locker room was the size of a shoebox, really, and it was just one straight way into. The coaches were around the corner, and I was with a couple, like Zuko was our truck driver, and our stick room, and I had to be friends with these guys before the game. I got them in there, and someone said something. It was in context with what was going on, but like Dougie Max, like walking by, says, "What the F is so fun?" We're down 3-0 after the first period. It was like, "What the F?" And he's kind of right. Like no one, I wasn't in the room. I was outside the room, but I was close enough proximity that he was right. And I was like, yeah, it made me think about after my mindset around that. Like, yeah, this is what they do. And I shouldn't be, even if it's something like an Eminem, it was a joke about Eminem. It was something really stupid, but it wasn't timing right. And, if we were winning 3-0, maybe, but I learned either way, never too high, never too low. Just, that's not the place for that. That's their, where they work. And as a coach, in a very demanding, where it's really on you for the wins and losses. He was right. And I learned from that. That was a couple years in too. It wasn't right away. It was right. And I yelled at the guys I was with. I was like, you see, he looked at me and yelled, you guys. It was kind of funny. And they were like, they had gone to junior high school. Both these guys would be. So it kind of felt like that, but it was a learning experience. And I took that forward. Even when I'm around the room now, still, at the times I stay away and know the coaches, that's their area. And that taught me, that was 27 years ago. I never forgot that lesson. And it was a valuable lesson. I'm happy that it happened, right. So it taught me how to be around a room even more. And I liked that at the time.
You mentioned Beezer, because now that you mentioned, obviously he was kind of, I guess looking back on it now, he was the alpha dog, I think, in that room, right? He was, sure. That cup run, he was the best player on that team. He had to be amazing for them to get that far, and he kind of had the biggest, sort of established all-star type pedigree, coming in. So I think that he was the big guy, and then he also had that personality too. And now you bring it up, yeah, he wasn't the most approachable. Definitely on game day, you didn't want to go anywhere near him.
That's right. Yeah,
and
super good guy.
He had an impact too when he spoke, right? Like I remember one of the most impactful things. I don't remember where we practiced. Where did we practice? It was an offsite place.
Gold Coast Arena back in December,
Gold Coast.
Yeah. It was like almost 50 miles away from the main building. It was a long way. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it wasn't a great setup, but I remember we had a practice there at Gold Coast. And anyways, whatever, normal practice. And he took me aside after the practice, and he made a comment about my release and my shot. He said, like, you have an NHL shot. I beat him high a couple times, right? Yeah. From about 25 feet. And he kind of hairy eyeballed me a little bit. And he pulled me aside, being the 10-year veteran guy that he was, and congratulated me on my shot and said, keep using it. And anyways, like, it was, there's a lot of things that happen in the course of a, 15-year career or whatever. But like, when someone like that takes the time, that normally you wouldn't think would, right. It really had an impact on me.
Well, it's funny because that famous picture that we went to the Cup, I have it in my office actually, where, I'm on the center, we won in Pittsburgh in Game 7, and, they presented the Prince of Wales trophy, and Scrudland, we were out there, it was chaotic. We were, no one expected us to get past Boston really. And here we are going to Colorado to play the Avalanche, and Scrudland called out the captains and he called everybody else out. So he called Timmy and I, we jumped in the photo. Beezer hadn't come over yet. And he was so emotional that he grabbed me and Timmy, and we're kind of the center of the photo. And that's the kind of guy he was. Like, he was, in his methodology and his game, but that was time to celebrate. And he really helped. And we were, that moment is encapsulated in Panther history and always will be, regardless of what they do going forward. That's always going to be something I'm proud of being part of. And Beezer was the main reason that Tim and I were, received as well as we were. Screwy called everybody over, but I didn't expect to be, he just hadn't come over yet. He was still shaking guys' hands at the line. So it just worked out that way. But the same guy we were really intense and really, making sure that everything was in line, was the same guy that after was the biggest one to celebrate with us. So that was a great,
Right.
That was one of my highlights of my career too.
If you're a first-time listener, generally we do have on hockey players. This is one of those times where we don't, but I know that you're enjoying this. It's really about it, meaning the podcast, is really about hockey as a whole. The journey of the hockey player, the development of the hockey player, the nuances of being great, and having some laughs and having a good time along the way. So if you are here for the first time, by all means, welcome. I really appreciate your company. I really appreciate that you're allowing us to keep you company, whatever you're doing today. And and if you're enjoying the content and if you're enjoying the conversation, by all means, share the podcast. I ask that every episode. I really do. I think it's important for the growth. The organic growth is really what drives anything, in my opinion. Somebody who cares about the content they're listening to, somebody that gets value from it, and then takes the time to go out of their way to let somebody else know about that, whether that means through a social media link, whether that means a forward, whether that means a share, whether that means in conversation. It doesn't really matter, but it does matter that you just don't keep this little hidden gem of Up My Hockey to yourself. So by all means, please share. If you are somebody that hasn't given the review, Apple Podcasts allows you to review podcasts. It really is super easy. It can honestly take 10 seconds to put 5 stars and put A+ as your comment. Like, that would be fantastic. That's quick. That's easy. That helps the podcast. It's amazing when a podcast gets recommended. Like, I just had somebody from New York reach out to me, said that wasn't even sure how the podcast was delivered to them, but came up in their feed. So in other words, Apple gave them a podcast to listen to, and What's Next. Started listening, has been a faithful fan, and last month I started working with his son, 2007 defenseman. And it's just things like that, his son needed help in the mindset department, wasn't getting the most out of his game, wasn't enjoying the game as much as he could, and wasn't thriving, right? And we want players to thrive. We want players to be empowered. So because of somebody taking the time to write a review, told Apple that, you know what, this podcast is worthy of listening to, so we're going to share it with other people who find hockey important, and now this young athlete is able to get help and is now thriving in his season and is playing the best hockey of his life and is enjoying the sport. So, I mean, that is what this is all about, is to be able to get the word out there to help young athletes achieve what the heck ever it is they want to achieve, and to really fall in love with this sport as we have. So thanks again. Reviews are awesome. Feedback is fantastic. Letting me know personally you're enjoying an episode is fantastic. And yeah, thanks for being here, and let's get back to the interview with Scott Tinkler. You mentioned Brian Scrudland. I mean, anyone who knows Screwy as his name, I mean, what an enigmatic leader. Like, he was always the life of the party, and always making somebody smile or making somebody laugh, and always had a joke. But definitely was serious about his work too, like hardest working guy on the ice, I remember, and just one of those guys that brought everybody together. What do you remember about Screwy? You must have some good Brian Screwland story.
Oh, well, I mean, we could spend days on that, because he really is one of the most unique human beings I've ever met. I was very fortunate. He was a major reason why this team was successful the way they were. His culture, his mindset, all the stuff that he did to bring to the room, to include all of us as part of that. And just from his preparation in the morning and laughing and joking, and he would poke at Beezer a little bit. He was the one that can get away with it a little bit, you know what I'm saying? But where he was really the kind of guy that, even after a loss, he'd start the day, oh, what's going on? He'd turn the radio on and just kind of get thinking about it's over, right? Like, now I know there's become a lot more of a mindset than it was back then, but then it's like, all right, let's go on to the next game. And, he was the kind of guy I'd pull the sticks, and he said, who are we playing tonight, Tink? I'm saying, well, we got Washington. He goes, that effing Hunter there? I said, yeah, he's there. He goes, how many sticks you have? I said, I pulled 6 for you. He goes, put 12. I said, all right. I know I'm going to break 6 on his head. Stuff like that, just kind of real funny, little anecdotes like that. He was great for, like, Rob, who was his roommate, Niedermeyer, and just kind of, poking at Terry Kartner and stuff. But, one story that really kind of tell us his true character. I can tell you that we had, it was maybe at that cup run, maybe right after, but at that old practice rink, there was a gentleman in a wheelchair that Screwy had promised. He brought him in after a practice, and we had pizza. We were at the practice rink and brought him in and moved him around, showed everybody the area, this, that, and the other. And Screwy was one of the last guys to leave. So it was just myself, Timmy, and Marnie were straight in the rink up. It was a practice day. And with no exaggeration, there were 2 cars really left in the parking lot, Screwy's and this gentleman who had a wheelchair. So Screwy was driving out and sees the guy in the wheelchair. The guy was able to drive. No one's around Brian right now, mind you. No, he doesn't know we're watching him leave. He gets out of the car, helps the guy break the wheelchair down, put it in his car, shake his hands, and sees him off. Like, that is character. Like, that's when no one's watching, really. That's really a testament to the kind of person that he really, truly was. He didn't do it because there was a camera on him, or he did it because he felt that was the right thing to do. And he was that type of person. And I'm very fortunate that I had the opportunity to be around. I'm still very close to him and remain in contact with him. And ironically, after I left the team full time, and he came back as assistant coach, people that are still there that are still here speak of him as the true best person they ever met in the game. So irrespective, player, coach, management, wherever he's been, he's touched people's lives because of who he is and what he is. So certainly one of the greatest of all time. And I would, definitely put that to say he's one of the best you could ever meet.
Yeah, he was. What a great thing to say about somebody. I mean, that's one thing that you don't necessarily understand. At least I didn't in the moment a lot of times, about like the impact that you were able to make, and just with subtle gestures, right? Just being a good person and just being a good human and throughout kind of the annals of hockey, it seems that people around the different big sports, whether it's reporters or whatever, always seem to say that hockey players are the guys that they enjoy spending the most time with. You are on a hockey podcast, but by all means, you're entitled to whatever opinion is true. Like, did you experience that in your time being around these athletes, that hockey players were I don't know. You tell me what hockey players are like.
Yeah, no, they're definitely a different breed of individual. I think they're humble and they're so skilled. It's amazing. I've had the pleasure of being around Scott Mellenby and Dave Lowry and Tom Fitzgerald, and these guys are still around and they're in the game, which is great. And Bill Lindsay, who's still a very close friend of mine, and Rob Niedermeyer and Eddie Jovanovski, and to watch their evolution, and Roberto Luongo, who was just inducted in the Hall of Fame. I had him as a 21-year-old when he came from New York, and before he met his wife, and before he had kids, and before he was this, manager of a hockey team. He was just a kid that started out in New York, came here, and became friends. And there really are. Paul Laws, toughest guy without a doubt I ever saw play, and the nicest guy off the ice, and just. There's a different type of mindset and mentality with these guys. They're genuinely really, really nice people. In fairness, I'm biased as well. I haven't been around a lot of other pro athletes. I'm sure there's guys like that as well. But to your point, I think the general consensus from the people outside of the immediate, meaning like us, would be the media would be a great indicator. And if they say that, it does hold some credence to it. I mean, one more quick story was after that year, the finals, there was these trophies that were made up, and unfortunately, a business person from the business side made it up and didn't include Timmy and I. And it created a lot of havoc. The guys were really upset that Timmy and I didn't get one. So long story short, I mean, this came to Bill Torrey and Brian Murray and Chuck Fletcher and Dumbledore. They called us in. They're like, this is causing a distraction. They made this mold. They broke it. You're not going to get. We said, it's no problem. We don't want to be a distraction. Scrudlin wound up giving his to Timmy, and Scott Mellenby wound up giving his to me. And that's it right there. Again, another something. That's the trophy that I got. Wow. And it's from Scott, and that's the stuff that he could have kept that for himself or his family. And that was just a testament to the kind of leadership that we had. And I was fortunate to be around. And I will cherish that forever. And that's why I have such fond memories of that time and of those people.
And is that the encapsulating moment, like that cup run? Because the next year was the year I got traded. Kirk Muller came in for me, and can't remember. I think you guys. I don't. You think you never did make the playoffs that year? I don't think, right?
We did make the playoffs the next year after the run.
Yeah,
but we lost to the Rangers. I think they won 4 straight overtime. Gretzky was there. I think it was the only year Gretzky and Messier played.
Yeah.
Gretz got that hat trick against us in New York, I recall. And then I think Esa Tikkanen slapped that one against Beezer. That was the last time that team was really kind of together.
Right.
They started the next year with the Stu Barnes trade and other stuff, and Screwy went up. Stuff started happening then, and that was so we made the playoffs one more time in 2001 with Pavel.
Yeah.
And we lost to the Devils that ultimately went and won the cup. Scott Niedermayer was there, and that was when that was Brodeur, and that was Danico and all those guys that were that almost that dynasty they had of guys. Jacques Lemaire was coaching. They beat us. After that, then no, we didn't make the playoffs for many years and didn't make the second round until last year, if you can imagine.
Right.
25 years.
Well, I was just going to say, though, I mean, it tells me what it takes to be successful in that league. And a lot of times, which is completely conducive to what I do now. And really, it's been a mindset shift for a lot of different organizations, whether it be at the college level, junior level, or at the pro level, is like the type of people that they want to bring in. I mean, of course, you want to have skill and you need skill to win, but it's not necessarily the forefront of every scouting report now. It's like, who are the guys in the locker room? Because the locker room matters, and that was a special locker room, to your point.
Yes, it certainly was. And I'm very fortunate that I was able to be part of that and grateful. And yes, and I know that there's other, like, I know guys that had went on and won cups and this, that, and the other, and share that as well. It's important. It really is. And I think there's something to be said about how just important. Sometimes I do believe it does get undervalued, from a level of X's and O's and maybe just writing names on a list. There's maybe a variable that I'm glad they identify that now as an important part of why guys are successful, not necessarily solely because of what they're doing on the score sheet. There's more to it than that. Yeah. And I think that if you get that to, the guys that are able to plug some of that in, that's great. But there's certainly a value to those guys as well. And I think the guys that are the best will tell you that, in the world. And you are a testament to that. You can tell, being around guys that you were around. And I'm sure there's guys that they have that, maybe not have produced as much as maybe the management would like, but certainly produced such a value in that room and in the culture of that team.
Yeah. Well said. The one name you mentioned as well, but from back in the day, that was kind of an instrumental part of you learning the ropes and taking you under your wing was Lindy Ruff and Lindy and just a little bit with Lindy. Like, Lindy is somebody that I also remember from that time there. He was the guy that was on the ice with us after practice. I mean, Sutter was out there a little bit, but mostly Lindy. Lindy was the guy at the back of the plane playing cards with us. He was the guy telling the jokes and sewing pockets together and, all the stuff that he would do with the practical jokes. And anyway, just somebody that I fondly remember. I mean, somebody that I knew that cared about the guys. And then on the next level of a connection, Dave Oliver, who's a Vernon player here, went with David Quinn to the Rangers. And so Lindy was part of their staff there. And Dave just could not say enough about Lindy Ruff, about really said he's probably the best human being I've ever met. Like, that was kind of like how he talked about Lindy, and now Lindy's moved on and has been in Jersey and now having some success there. Like, talk about a guy that's been around the game a long time. What are your memories of Lindy Ruff?
Exactly what you're saying. I was very fortunate. He was here for the first 4 years, and that was the reason why I believe success as well. His input, like you say, he was extremely laid back and funny and part of the jokes. And I ironically, we just played the Devils right before Christmas. I saw him and I tried to get him to admit to doing some of the stuff, and he still denies it. I said, okay. I said, listen, it's 29 years ago. No one's gonna, because I'm telling you, it wasn't me. I said, okay, Lindy. And he kind of smirks. And there was one joke that was Dave Smith, our medical trainer. He was the guy with the 9-pack abs and all this stuff like that. And someone kept tying his shirts together, and he was blaming it on Joe Sorella and these other guys like that. And I said, and David got upset, like, his shirts were actually ruined. I mean, whoever did it was legitimately really putting him down. He just wanted to, I said, and who was tying Dave's shirts? So I can't deny that wasn't me. So I finally got something out of him. That's even 29 years later, makes me laugh. But yeah, phenomenal human being, phenomenal, caring, fun, cared about the athletes. I think that's transcribed extremely well and translated to him going to Buffalo. They had a lot of success there. Went to the Cup finals with them, obviously, and then ultimately with the Rangers and now with New Jersey. And I wish nothing for him and his family. He's a great, great guy. And again, another reason this team found success early on. And I credit whoever, the original people that put this together just to identify that as a huge part of our culture. And he was a big piece of that puzzle.
Give us one alleged Lindy Ruff prank, because There were a lot. I think I maybe had him even admit to one. But what do you remember as one of his alleged pranks?
Well, there was someone shirts were coming up missing, like golf shirts and stuff like that. So it turns out they wound up under his cubbyhole. So he walked in and he had like 14 shirts on. He had all the shirts, and his defense was like, "Do you think that I would come in like that?" It was a perfect alibi because he did second guess. Now I don't know what happened. He just walked in and the guys were screaming at him because he had all these shirts on, and he was like, "Yeah, do you think I'm going to put the shirt?" But I guess psychologically he could have been the guy. That is a great way for him to think that it wasn't me. So we brought that story up last week. 2 weeks ago we saw him, and he won't admit that he was the one getting the shirts, but he did say that he clearly found them in his cubby. And there's another one was Brian Scrudlin's shoes were missing. So Screwy actually went on a flight with his flip-flops and got on the loudspeaker. This is long before, the rules changed with 9/11 and all that stuff. But he's like, "Listen, I want my shoes before we land." The feed file. And it was really funny. And no one ever really, and Lindy was alleged for the shoes. So, and they were like, "Give me the shoes, Lindy," or yelling at him and stuff like that. But it was funny stuff and just really a way to get your mind off, the other parts of the game and just added a real fun culture to it. And it was really funny to be, part of that. I'm not so sure, some of that stuff now. I don't know. It was just funny stuff. I mean, guys, shirts now may cost a lot more. I don't know than the T-shirts they were wearing back then, but guys.
I remember, and I can't remember who it was, but he sewed all the pockets shut on some, but so he sewed the wallet into like the back pocket and like the car keys into the front pocket or whatever, and so there was the one process of the guy going out the parking lot, one of the players, I can't remember who it was, so he had to open up his pant pocket to get his keys out, right? And then he goes to get gas and he can't pay for the gas because his pocket's sewn up in his jeans. So he has to go to the restroom and take them off. Like, oh my God.
That's funny stuff. I'm sorry. That's really, I know. And I don't sure if you'll ever admit, I don't know who that was. And I stay out of that stuff. I like to, I got blamed for a lot of that nonsense too. I'm telling you, I didn't do, of course they're going to blame me. I didn't want. Dave Lowry brought a funny story, but I was a Marine and they were able to get some sort of official letter. I was waiting for my honorable discharge. They got me some letter, and I believe they had Brian or Doug hand it to me on the plane that I wasn't going to get. I was getting a dishonorable discharge, and I snapped and I went crazy. It was a formal letter, and they were all laughing. I'm like, stuff like it was just fun stuff that group of guys really valued, and it was fun. I got shoe checked at West Point. First time we're there with Roger Nielsen. I hear the clanking of the glass and with all these cadets. And I was out of the Marine Corps like 2 years earlier. And I'm sitting there next thing you know, they're clanking the glass. What's that? And I look at this big thing of A57 sauce on my shoe. And it's like, just little stuff like that was funny. That could have been Lindy. That could have been Screwy. That could have been a host of different guys. I don't know. No one ever admitted to it. But
we were gosh, that bringing back some memories. Like we were shoe check for those listening. I mean, that's just like such a term. I don't even know if they do it anymore, but it was during a team meal that very often somebody would sneak like in around your chairs underneath the table. They might be hiding there already, and they would have some type of condiment generally, and they would place it on somebody's shoe, like the end of your shoe. And these dress shoes, leather and suede and everything else. And then the player that would do it would go back to his seat, and then the boys would all start clinking their glasses, and everybody pushes their seat back to see who got shoe checked. Like it was completely comical and hilarious and kind of just a part of the game. But the one part that I remember, which was so funny, was when we were in Peterborough. It was when one of the training camps was in Peterborough.
Yeah,
and it was like this big, like formal dinner with the mayor, and the mayor must have been 103 years old. And Screwy shoe checked the mayor of Peterborough. Oh my God. So the mayor had no idea why there was sour cream on the end of his shoe, right? He had this like look, and we're all cheering, and he was the Screwy, right?
I remember that. I was there for that. Yeah, that was Roger Nielsen. It was Peterborough had his yeah, that's what we had camped there. That's right. And I recall that's what I'm saying. Such jokesters, and I didn't know it was Screwy. I mean, so it's funny that it's probably getting me too a lot of the times, but it was very commonplace in the Panthers team dinners to have a shoe check. So I'm happy that it was usually me. I stopped even pushing my chair away because I figured it was, I hear the clanking. I'm like, all right, let me just grab the napkins now because I know it's going to be there.
Because the best part was like when somebody ended up being the target, like like you kind of knew, like you knew it was coming, right? So you're kind of looking over your shoulder and you're like, when are they going to get me? But then they would always get you just when you weren't looking. You're like, I can't believe they got me again.
I hope they're still doing that. I think that's I really do think that's a fun part of bonding with the guys, and but definitely there's a bunch of guys that could have been with our team.
Up My Hockey is not just a podcast. As most of you know, Up My Hockey is also support, mindset support and coaching for athletes and teams, and is even going to the association level. Instead of just being a manager of a local AAA team and saying, hey, my team needs this, one, that is fantastic, and your team does need it. And if you aren't using someone like me, you should find someone like me. But if you can't find someone like me, then use me, because the content that has been created in the Peak Potential Hockey Project has been received so fantastically. It is moving players into new levels of performance and in new levels of empowerment, and they are thriving in their games. So mindset training, mindset fitness are things that you can add to your program to make not only your players better, but make your whole program better, make your branding better, make the opportunity and the reason for people to be there greater. So yeah, if you're involved in a team, or if you're a coach, or if you're involved in an association or an academy, and you want a plug and play system for mental fitness that also includes support, if you so see, meaning coaching support from me or somebody from Up My Hockey, then now is the time to reach out, because the 23-24 season is going to be here before we know it. I'm recording this right now in January, and I'm already taking inquiries for the 2023 season. It's best to get on the books now. It's best to get it in the budget now. It's best to let your coaches and your players know now, so they don't go other places, right? This is a reason for players to stay put, or reason for players to come to your association or your program, to give them that mental fitness training that they need to grow confidence, to become more resilient, to be able to battle through adversity and find opportunities, and all the great things that Up My Hockey is all about, the holistic development of the player. The holistic development of the player. I am such an advocate for that. It is not just about hockey. We can grow these personal development skills, which make these hockey players better, but also have them walk away from the game, whether it's walk away from the game after practice, whether it's walk away from the game after a game, or whether it's walk away from the game permanently whenever someone decides to leave hockey, that the skills that the Peak Potential Hockey Project teaches will stay with them for life. So that is what is cooking right now. Get your name on the list, whether it be for spring or for the fall. You can reach me at upmyhockey.com. That's all things Up My Hockey are there. My programs, my contact forms, my summer programs, all those good things are there. But by all means, reach out and let's talk support for your association or for your team next year, and let's get you on the schedule. All right. Thank you so much for listening. Now back to the conversation with Scott Tinkler. We can't not talk about that run to the cup without talking about the Rat, because the Rat was like what that whole thing was. You mean the thousands of rats on the ice, and Juan his net, and the famous kind of story with that, and that was all based off a true story. And like, I don't know, I mean, it is a long time departed, and I know a lot of the listeners now maybe weren't even hockey fans then. Like, can you talk about what happened there in the dressing room?
Sure. It's interesting,
you must have been a part of it.
Yeah, well, right. It was I believe it was October 8th, 1995. We were playing. It was that shortened season, and it was our opening night. We had played the Devils the day before in New Jersey. They raised their banner, so we had seen that. And we're playing a home opener the next night. And for the home opener, they would list you in alphabet. Ordinarily, guys go on their own, right? The Beezer would go first, and then the goalie would take you out, and then guys had their place in the line. Well, the home opener was by the number, so they called you out as the player. So guys are in that line down the room. And all of a sudden, this giant rat, like the size of a possum, comes running down our hallway and goes in the room. And as you recall, it was a small room. It went to the left, and guys are like jumping out of the way. It goes right around, goes to Scott Mellamy, and he one-times it, kills the rat, and then went out, scored 2 goals, and John Van Beesbrook family coined the term rat trick. Well, that night, I had taken the rat out. This is where a lot of people may not know the story. I took the rat out dumped it in the garbage. And at the end of the night, I went to where it was killed, and I just denoted 10, 8, 95, and I've circled the blood area and put RIP Rat 1. So that's where it kind of started. And then guys were like, did you save the rat? Where I said, no, I didn't save the rat. So what happened was, it was around Halloween. I went to I was at Aventura Mall where I lived, and they had a pop-up like Halloween store. It had this giant rat. So I bought the rat. I put it underneath where it was on the tape deck, where we had the tape, not the deck, but the tape stored.
Yeah. And
someone took a photo of it. And the next thing you know, whenever Scott scored, they started throwing the rats down. That's really how the rat, and that Mel will attest to this, and the guys will. That's how the rat thing kind of really, really started. And I actually, the day we left Miami Arena, I cut out the drywall, and I got the actual rat, and I went to archives. They saved it. We had it, and I had possession of it because I had bought the rat. I give the rat to Scott Mellamy. He has possession of the original rat. But that's really, I mean, and what's ironic was we got Sandis Ozelich later played for us. He played for Colorado on that team. He actually said they hated those rats. And he said, Pat Wall, which is that Ray Shepard scored the only goal in Miami Arena. We lost in 4, but he scored the only one in Miami Arena. Patrick Wall went back in the net. All those rats came down. According to Sandis Ozelich, Wall went to the Colorado bench and said, that is the last goal they're going to score on me. And that was the last goal that we scored. The rats only came down after we lost, whatever it was.
Right.
But he made that comment. Now, if you ever talk to Patty Wall, you could ask him yourself or Ozelich, whatever. That's what Ozelich told us or me. It made a lot of sense because we didn't score another goal after that.
Wow, and he was that good too.
Absolutely. It was funny. Screwy kind of messed with him too. Screwy had won a cup with him in Montreal. So he knew sort of his intricacies and would kind of go, and Billy Lindsay and Tommy Fitz they knew he'd like to touch the blue line. So they would kind of get in his head and try to get in his way and do all kind of stuff like that. So little mental games they played with him. Clearly one of the best goalies of all time too.
Right. So
that was a fun run.
So then with that rat, which is super cool, because I remember seeing the circle there in the RIP, like, wow, like you are the guy. But like, did it get into the press that night that the rat was in there, or when did it start to
Yeah, that night, John Van Beesbrook coined the term rat trick. Really, he did. Scott scored 2 goals and killed a rat, and that's really where it started. And next thing you know, it's funny because that's how traditions do. You know, that was the year that finally we really, the first couple of years, everybody who came to, not everybody, but the majority of people that came to the game were Ranger fans and Flyer fans and Detroit fans. And we finally had our own base of fans, really. And that was sort of the, I would never compare it to the Octopi, but what's fascinating was that watching the NHL network, they had, I think, the top 10, rituals of hockey. And that, I think, was number 6 that made the all-time list. It was pretty cool from a newer team to have that. And, ultimately they had to put rules in because of it.
Yeah,
but I think that they did. They put rules because that all the stuff. What wasn't so fun was when we went to Philly, them or Pittsburgh throwing rat tracks at us, or started weighing down the rats with these fishing weights and throwing them down from the 3rd level, hitting us on our bench. And so it did become a bit of a liability, but nonetheless, that's the story, and that's really the story behind it. That so it made it that night. There's a photo that was in the Herald, and the next thing is history. That's how it goes.
So I got a personal question, and I highly doubt that you remember, but if you do, it'd be cool for some light for me and my own curiosity. So when I got called up from Spokane for that run, I landed the night before. We were playing Boston. I think you guys were 2 or 3 games into the series, and I was supposed to play in Game 4. Like when I got there, like I was told I was in the lineup. Went to the pregame meal, like showed up at the rink. Then I was going to play because Ray Shepard was out with a shoulder injury.
Okay.
Anyway, so I get to the rink. I'm ready to go. Obviously nervous and excited, and all the million emotions you can imagine. And then, but Ray Shepard ends up showing up and says that he's fine or whatever. And I get tapped on the shoulder that I'm not going to play, and then never did play a game. Right. Then ended up turning into the Black Ace, and it never wasn't needed. But like that, in the first 24 hours of me being there, I was supposed to play. Did you? It just sort of like, I always look back on that like this miracle recovery, because there's been many times, obviously, in pro locker rooms that if a guy says he can't play the night before or even the morning of, like he doesn't just all of a sudden get better and play. Like, do you remember him being injured at all, or what might have happened there?
No, it's ironic because what would happen was I would have been at the other rink anyway, and that would have come down to Timmy and Mark would take the stuff down after practice.
Right.
The team would skate at the ice rink in Sunrise, and then we'd bring the equipment down. I would come down later. So I would not have been, they would have set everything up.
Right.
So I'm sorry. I wish I had recollection of that. I don't.
Yeah, I didn't expect
like
you
the
to.
Black Ace stuff like that. And you being around for all that stuff and being just a great guy and very skilled player and just hanging out with you a lot because you were out there after everybody else left. We were out there collectively, part of all that stuff. And you still bond. You have a lot. I think we were carrying 30 guys or whatever it was. And, it was a lot. And there is a value to that too. You are around that.
Yeah. Oh,
culture.
100%.
Yeah. And it's a great thing. So yeah, no, I don't recall that specifically, but
as your relationship grew, and you talked about your relationship with Lindy Ruff, and you talked about Don McLean who was there, and what type, and that was the thing I was wondering, because before we got on, I said, Tank and Timmy, and you guys are around us more than anyone is, and you guys are around the players in their most natural state, I would say, than anyone else, right? Because anytime a coach gets in front of you or a GM, there's some type of a mask you kind of put on, or like the things you're supposed to say or ways you're supposed to act, regardless of how comfortable you are. Like maybe more so for me as a younger guy, less than Brian Scrudlin, who seemed to be kind of the same way he was in front of everybody. But in saying that, my lead up for that is, like, did you ever get called into Don's McLean's office or Lindy's and say, hey, what do you know about X, Y, and Z? Or like, was there ever that type of a conversation had about inside scoop on players?
No, not really. I would tell you, believe me, I would not pull back it wasn't really like that. We sort of adopted, we were kind of there. It wasn't really our job to evaluate talent and this, that, and the other. The guys that are doing it for a while know their role and don't, there may have been other guys around that do that stuff and they kind of get that, they think they're a GM type scenario. Us, we were just happy to do what we did. And thankfully there wasn't a lot of that. It wasn't so much, and I'm between us, I'm grateful for that, because I think that if that was sort of the culture, you wouldn't have really been able to see the access that we had. I think that guys would have been a lot more tentative to really open up and do stuff. I can tell you from a perspective of, as the game turned a little more European per se, there were it got a lot more, I won't say cliquey, but you can't blame guys that, as more Russians came in or more other, nationality Czechs came in, they would sort of gravitate to their own. So it got a little harder to keep a balance with that stuff. And you couldn't blame him, because our philosophy was, if I went to go work in the Czech Republic and there was 3 North American guys, I'm probably going to speak to them too. So it was kind of that understanding of it. And it wasn't disrespectful. It was just the way it was. So I think that this organization did a good job. I had Chuck Fletcher, who was another phenomenal guy, and still obviously as GM now with Philly, and very, very instrumental in being a part of what was here. And no, not really so much. We didn't get involved in a lot of that stuff like that. And thankfully, if stuff went on, it never really hit the room. Guys, if there was stuff maybe outside the room that may have occurred here or there, it wasn't, by the time whatever happened, listen, it's a hockey, guys. Things happen, right? But by the time it got to the area of sacredness, it had already been resolved, dissolved. I'm not saying guys didn't have issues with each other. Sure. I mean, I can't recall many on-ice fights at practices. Maybe that was just, more of a sign of us being in the midst of a couple of game losing streak and frustration and the old saying that, negative emotion is better than no emotion. Yeah. So guys out there, but for the most part, never really too bad. But no, never really called upon to give that type of opinion.
Yeah. That is good, because then that would have put you in a really awkward spot, right? I mean, not that maybe the players would have known, but at some point they probably would have found out. And then, I mean, you're obviously, your job kind of entails, to answer the question if you were asked, which isn't fair either. But I just thought that it was always interesting, because definitely you guys got to see, the real side of the players, right? And kind of had a feel for what was going on in that room, probably better than even the coaching staff did.
Sure. That I would agree with that. And that's true. And I think that's part of maybe why they didn't want to jeopardize that for our well-being, in terms of at least being around the room. I think that might have created maybe some conflict. As I said, the whole thing with that trophy, the guys came and spoke to us. We never wanted to be a distraction to anything. That was never our place. We've always, for us as trainers, or I say trainers with equipment, our goal was to get the guys on the ice. And once they were on the ice, they were the coaches. And after they came back to our area, we never wanted to be an excuse a guy couldn't play because his skate wasn't right or stick wasn't right or equipment didn't show up. I mean, so I was always very happy with our staff, based on like that Peterborough. We had to drive the equipment, and for us to have 80-something guys show up to outfit with jerseys and socks and this, that, to get them on the ice is quite an accomplishment. It's a lot of credit to the guys that do that and continue to do that every day. It kind of goes not without reward or not being noticed, but it's part of their job. But still, an effective part. Our goal was to get them on the ice, and we were always high five after we got the start of camp. The first day of camp, everybody's on. The equipment showed up from Russia or from wherever it was coming from, or this guy's from even Spokane was hard to get, or stuff out of the Western Hockey League. Stuff gets lost, or we had to pick. Back then, we would pick the guys up from the airport. They didn't have services, so I'd go get guys, or this, that, picking guys up in groups in a van. We rented a van and do that. So it was just different, and that's a testament to the people that do that job and do it well. So yeah, that's an accomplishment.
No, a huge part. And then I'm just thinking, you said about the appreciation aspect, and I think hockey in general does a good job with that, as far as even from at the end of the year, like the playoff scenario. I think trainers aren't really responsible for the playoff bonus or the tips or whatever, but guys would always generally take care of you guys, right? Like that'd be something that would happen.
That's exactly what would happen. It was always good for the guys, and back then there was stuff that we didn't have contractually that the guys knew about, so they would step up and help us out with that stuff too. So it really is a team from top to bottom. And it's a bond. And when you're with guys like that, you really do develop strong. And again, I was in a war in the military, so I get what it's like to be at someone else's, them relying on me the way I rely on them. And there are a lot of carryovers and crossovers between sports and military. And I think there's a reason for that, because there was that mentality of the room is our defense. And you mess with him, you mess with me type thing. And it really is part of the culture as well. Not only hockey, but all sports. And I think it's an important way to I think it does transition well in terms of at least understanding that's the mentality that has to exist for your guys. And when there are guys that don't necessarily agree to that, they kind of weed themselves out. And unfortunately, that's just the nature of what happens. And that plays itself out within the culture of the room. And that, and it's different than in the corporate world where I've experienced, where there's a lot, it's a lot more for themselves. Rightfully, you're not in that. You're not pulling. The one thing I would say about professional sports that's so great is that there's an end and a start. Like you finish your season, right? Whether you win it or lose it, it's over, right? And you start fresh the next year. And you don't have that necessarily in a corporate world where every day is just the mundane. You have new jobs. Thankfully, what I went into was transportation. There was 50 new jobs the next day, but it wasn't everybody pulling for the same goal necessarily. It was a lot different. So when everybody's pulling the same, and you see great examples of teammates and teams and this, that, and the other, and it's really a great thing when it all comes together.
That's a good point. I never really thought of that before, because there is, I remember just like, well, not that it was a long time ago, but Christmas, like the holidays, like me and like got my hockey and trying to grow it and the podcast and the on ice stuff that I have. And anyways, I mean, all the stuff that you have being an entrepreneur and, having a business, and sometimes you just feel like you're underwater, right? And there isn't like that end of season horn that goes that says, right, okay, now you get this, and you're going to go back to training again. Like it just never ends, right? And and it was just a really good break where it was almost like, I don't know, it wasn't almost even like a choice. It was just like, all right, like we hunkered down at home, like all we did was play games and watch movies and kind of put everything away, and it was nice. But it's hard to plan that in. I mean, hockey, it's planned in, right? Whenever it ends, it ends. But then at least that it has ended. And yeah, that's a great point. I never really thought of it that way, because it is a little bit draining the corporate world when it comes to that, because it's just never a finish line.
Yeah, and candidly too, with no disrespect to anybody I work outside of hockey, when you're in hockey, and even for someone like me, you take for granted just the athleticism that it takes to be in that. And you guys are really the top 1% in the world at what you do, period. And that barrier of entry is so challenging compared to when you're in the corporate world, and it's not nearly that type of level of commitment and excellence that your coworker is, with all due respect. And I own the business, and I'm telling you from that perspective, it's just different when you're around that. I think it's taken for granted a lot of times just how hard you guys really work and the sacrifices you make. I mean, I'm still, being a grown up in America, I know it's changed a bit now, but the billet system of Canada, when you're 16 years old and getting shipped off to a different place and living with a whole new family and riding that bus, and that's a whole new culture to us here, at least for me. I went in the Marine Corps at 18, so I was young when I did it. my oldest is now at the stage of college where I was getting ready to deploy into a war. Thankfully, he's not in that, and I was. And so it's different how, for your kids, it's a lot different. But, that culture that was bred, and just the hours and the sacrifice and the early mornings that you guys have to do to get to that level of pro hockey is really commendable to you guys. And I don't know if that's really identified enough to the guys that, to a pro athlete. So, I mean, I know you've talked to guys that have been in the game and coached and this, that. I didn't, as you alluded to early on. I didn't do that. I came in as a newbie to the sport and really got a quick appreciation for just how hard it is to get out there and skate and work, and seeing the guys behind the scenes and knowing that when they fight, that's real. People always ask, is that state? No, I mean, no. Yeah, sure. There may be, I will never say it's premeditated, but there are games, that the two big boys are probably going to tangle, but it's not like set. It's not like, hey, this is a wrestling type scenario. Those guys go out there and they punch faces. That's a tough thing to do. It's not an easy thing to knowing that's your job. Yeah. And a lot of credit is deserved to not just, but anybody else too. I mean, you came up in time, Podsy, with the guys. It was a different league. I mean, with the fighting, and it's funny because, like Jeff Chikrin, who's here now, he's around and he does our media for the Panthers. His son Jacob was just here, and Jacob's a specimen. And it's funny because they didn't have those type of off ice workouts. They didn't have the type of information about nutrition and sleep science and all the different values. They were better off having a punching bag than they were having anybody with a power, understanding the true value of eating and sleeping and hydration, So you came up at a time when guys, it was really, a culture of toughness and almost, we're not bullying by any means, but you had to defend yourself. The game's changed for the better in that regard, I think, but still different. And, it still exists, obviously, but not to that level it was back then. When you came up, we had line brawls in training camp. I mean, you don't even see that now in games, really. Yeah. Imagine guys were truly fighting for spots. It wasn't like it is now, I guess. I don't know the business side of it as much. I'm just saying, I know what I experienced. And I watch guys like a Chad Cabana come in who played at Tri-City, tough kid. And he takes on Paul Laws, who had just had 410 PIMs in the American Hockey League. And they go toe-to-toe in front of no fans. It was strictly for Cabana to get his name noticed. And that's what he had to do. And he did. And, Paul's trying to make the team. We didn't have, he hadn't played for us yet. So, there's all these different things that of the culture that's changed for the better. And they've identified headshots and what that means and shields and all the stuff that are now part of the game that wasn't part then. So hits to the head and what that means.
It's a tough game, and now it is still tough. But I mean, I lament a little bit about it, kind of in maybe a dinosaur sense. Like I don't know. I always took an immense amount of pride in being able to get a job done, in that era, right? Because you could not be timid and you could not be shy because that was exposed in a real big hurry,
Absolutely.
I said to somebody the other day, you know what? I think it was on the last podcast that hasn't aired yet, though, but with Ladislav Cohn, he asked me if I ever watched any old tapes. And from that time, there wasn't nothing digital, right? So either I just never saw anything, and video was coming in. Roger Nielsen had made video pretty important just across the league, so we would watch video, but the guys wouldn't have access to their own shifts, or it wasn't like it is nowadays. But last month, my old man dropped off this box of old crusty VHS tapes that he had since I was 20 years old, right? Wow. And so I plucked a few in the other day, and there was one game of us in Florida playing against the Red Wings, and I would happen to be in the lineup that night, and there was legitimately 3 major penalties on me, from Fetisov, twice cross checks to the head, and a spear from Konstantinov in front of the net in the power play, like a legit spear, and one of them was a penalty for 2 minutes, right? And it was just looking back on that, I don't even remember that game. I didn't remember it at all. But now watching that and to be like, holy shit, I was trying to become an NHLer and be an NHLer, and there's no way that felt good. But you had to go out and you had to have your next shift and you had to go to the net just as hard the next time. And those are those little things that I kind of still take pride in. You know what I mean? That I was like, you had to. It was a little bit of a war. Yeah, it was a sport, but it was a little bit of a mini war out there. Absolutely, it was a battleground. Yeah,
that's right. And you saw it, and guys would. It really was. And it was back then. It was. You're absolutely correct. I think penalties that are now didn't even exist back then. You could Scott Stevens' reel tape. You could see a lot of stuff that you wouldn't be able to get away with. Not say get with, but it's just changed. That's all.
Yeah. And it is for the better.
I agree.
That kind of stuff, the player protection is for the better.
That's right.
But I do think that there's a broader range of personality types that can get into the game now. I guess is the one thing that I've said. You know what I mean? Like there's more room for more types of players. I think, you know, back in the day, you had to be cut from a little bit of the same cloth across the board, or else you just get exposed. You know, and so I don't know whether it's a good thing or a bad thing. I guess it's a good thing. But it still doesn't look family on. You've mentioned hydration. I mean, hydration for us was 6 beers after the game, right?
No, that's right. Yeah. I mean, we went to the finals that year. There was no bottled water. We had salt in Gatorades and apples, and oranges and bananas. We had no glove dryers. We had a hair dryer with a PVC pipe, and that was really what it was. I mean, we went that last game was 3 overtimes, whatever it was, and there was no extra stuff, and we didn't have heated. It was just different, it was just different. And you're right. It's evolved so much more and you'd see the speed and this, that, and the other, and the appreciation for the athleticism. Not that it didn't exist then, because clearly it did, but the knowledge wasn't there the way it is now. And you're right. Randy Moore tells funny stories about when he would go to camp in Quebec, like you're saying, the week before he would cut down from 12 beers to 6, and then smoke Marlboro Lights instead of Marlboro Reds. And then really kind of, and he would tell stories of guys that would just put a garbage bag on and drive around in their car with the windows up to lose weight. I mean, so, we come to camp to get in shape. Now clearly guys it's a 24-month evolution. You're accountable. I'm sure there's a little downtime after the season ends immediately, but not much. Yeah. And you have to remain that competitive and your body is really the temple, where you're right. It was 6 beers after a game and there was no hydration science. There was water, there's water in the Budweiser, I guess. Yeah. That's where that's really kind of what it was. So,
it is what it is. It was fun though. It made it a little bit of a cowboy era. You know what I mean? It was a little bit of a cowboy era. All right, one more break here from the conversation with Scott Tinkler, just to remind you of where you can follow me. My YouTube channel is growing. I can't claim that I'm like massive or anything, but I am approaching 500 subscribers, which is kind of exciting. And all I'm doing on YouTube, I have no idea what I'm doing on YouTube, but one of the things I am doing on YouTube is putting these episodes on there. So I put the episode in its entirety on there. You get to see me and my guest communicate, and sometimes that's a good way to listen to the interview. And I also do put podcast clips on there. When I do have time, I put lessons from the pro on there. That's actually where I do teaching videos about mindset, usually related to a podcast or a story that came up in a podcast. And sometimes I break down NHL clips or a junior clip about things that are happening on the ice that sometimes are entertaining. So I do enjoy creating content for YouTube. It's just like, my goodness, it's totally not my job, and my days are massively full. So when I do have the opportunity to create original content, I do. But one of the things that I do put on there is these episodes. So if you're listening right now in a car, and if you are a YouTube person, not even if you're necessarily going to watch, but get on there and subscribe. That's another way you can totally help grow the Up My Hockey brand, is just get on there, press subscribe, and whether you listen or not, that would be a fantastic way just to promote the growth of that channel. If you are not a YouTuber, I am on Instagram. That's kind of a more personal place to follow me. I usually keep my stories on Instagram fairly updated, so I'll show practice drills on there that I'm doing, or skating techniques that I'm working on the ice, or some of the programs that I'm running here on the ground locally in British Columbia. And I also do talk about mindset and some things that I am noticing on a day-to-day kind of level. So if you want to follow me more on a personal level, it's at Jason Padolin on Instagram. And of course, there is the Up My Hockey Facebook group, which is the parent group on Facebook. It's a fantastic community. We have conversations in there. We support each other in there. Those people are the first to get to know about my new products and services that are coming down the pipe, and also get access to the live podcast to ask questions live when I do choose to do that. So lots of places to follow me if you haven't already, and really appreciate the support. And let's get back to the interview with Scott Tinkler. You need to get going. I'll ask you one more, which I think, you being there in the trenches and seeing what's going on, and just the ability of I mean, I'm going to say hockey players, but I'm sure it is in other sports. Football, I know, is a real tough crew and everything else. But like the ability of players to play through stuff at the NHL level really was like mind-boggling to me. Is there anything that you remember in your time there that was like somebody that you were pretty inspired by what they were able to get through to go and put on the jersey and play?
Well, I think, and somebody you would know too, was Robert Svela. We call him the Trenchant Bull because this guy took that slap shot in the playoffs and basically refused to put a shield on. He went in there with Doc Robbins, who's still our doctor and still tells the story as well, would refuse Novocaine to get his teeth and came back out and had the shield and didn't even want to play with it. He just wanted to keep going. Like, there's so many stories of guys with pucks and, to the elbows and they cut the knees and the toes and concussions and this, that come back and play. And, it's a testament to that. Yeah. The really, Bobby Svela was one of the toughest guys I've ever seen with that type of pain threshold, or getting hit by, Eddie Jovanovski with hitting Lindros and fighting and then all your hands. And I'd see Rhett Warner's knuckles all beat up or
how about Blouser's knuckles?
Oh God. It looked like, went through a meat grinder, and tough as nails. Yeah. Like that's
really, couldn't even close his hands sometimes. Right.
Yeah, that's right.
And out for practice.
People, he had 39 fights that third year, 39. I mean, I don't think teams have that now. I mean, the league may not even have. The guy had one. He has the record, so I was pretty fortunate to be part of that. I don't think it'd ever be broken. He had 39 fights in 1 year, so that goes to show you. I mean, he was his hands and this, that, and the other, and what that takes to get out there mentally and know you're going to go out and fight Rob Ray or Tony Twist or, all those guys that back. Or Worrell's another guy. Peter Worrell had to go out and do the same. I mean, he's big compared to Paul's 6'2", but nonetheless, still knowing you have to go out there and do that as part of the job. There's a lot of respect for guys that would get up and do that, do their job, do it well, and continue to do it over and over again, which is it's hard. So
yeah, that's really cool. That was a special time, Tink, and thanks for coming on. It's awesome to see. I mean, Tommy Fitzgerald is moved on to be a GM, and we mentioned Lindy there being a coach, and Beezer I think is president of USA Hockey.
Yeah, he is. Yep.
And Pye was an assistant. Like, there's so many guys that moved on from that team. Billy Lindsay's doing your media now, right? Like
Jovo's there. He played well over 1,000 games.
What's Jovo doing?
He's doing TV for us as well.
Is he?
Yeah, he's there too. So yeah, he's doing that.
Oh, that's awesome. You got to give me his contact.
I will. I'll send it to you for sure.
He'd be a great interview as well.
He'd be great.
Yeah, I'm awesome to see that group kind of have gone on and done their things. And
Rob Niedermayer's another one. Look at Robbie. Won a cup in Anaheim and played a long career too, and great stuff. So
where's he living now? Do you know where he's at?
He's out in Cranbrook.
He is back in Cranbrook.
He's hiding out there. Yeah. So I joke.
I just ran into his brother the other day. His son played against one of my sons in a tournament. So good to see the Niedermayer name around there. So.
Absolutely, yeah. That's right.
Anyways, well, we didn't even talk about the alumni, but you're looking after the alumni and me, and maybe if I strike gold, I'll be playing that in that alumni game there at the All-Star Weekend. That'd be a ton of fun. But regardless, I know our paths will cross here again. We'll be in touch. I'm glad that we were able to get on, and boy, you brought back some good memories for me and some good laughs. So thanks, Tink.
Yeah, thanks, Podgy. And again, I'm really happy for what you're doing. You're doing a great job of what you do. I'm following you, and congratulations on this transition. I know it's not an easy thing to do, and you're doing a great job doing it. So keep that going for sure.
I appreciate that, Tink. Have a good one, man.
All the best, buddy. Take care. Talk to you soon.
All right, thank you so much for sticking around till the end. And if you did stick around till the end, I know you must be a diehard. You love the conversations, and if you are, then I'm going to give you this little cherry of a story that Scott shared with me afterwards. I think I've been pretty honest with my recollection abilities, which aren't great when it comes to my memory of my own hockey career. Like, there are definitely things that stand out, things that will be entrenched forever, but like the day-to-day funniness, the jokes, the things that happened on the bus, even like the majority of the games, like there's so much stuff that I know that I don't remember. And for anyone out there who is, if you are a young player right now, I'm telling you, you may think it sounds fluffy and stupid, but keep a journal, keep a hockey handbook. Write down the stories, write down the funny stuff and the good stuff and the bad stuff of your own journey. You will be so thankful when you're done, when it's all finished, whether you're 30, 40, or 50, and you can look back and you can recall and flip through some of your time in junior or bantam or midget, or even if you're a pro listening to this, by all means, listen to an old guy now and write it down. But anyways, I digress. Scott Tinkler says, after we get done with the conversation, he texts me and he goes, I didn't know if you wanted me to talk about the tickle trunk or not. And I was like, oh my gosh, the tickle trunk. Like, I remember that from Mr. Dress Up, for those of you who have watched that before, but I'm like, it's jogging my memory, but I do not know the story. I'm like, Tink, tell me about the tickle trunk. What's the tickle trunk? And apparently the tickle trunk was what was written on my jock when I came up from junior in Spokane the year I got called up to Florida. So it was like 1996. And I came to Florida. I was supposed to play for Boston, which you heard, against Boston, I should say, in the Stanley Cup playoffs. And I show up at the rink with this jock strap that has tickle trunk written on the cup, which I don't remember. I swear I wouldn't have written it on there, or at least I don't think I would have written it on there, that somebody probably on my team wrote it on there. And I show up, and I guess the vets, he said, just thought it was hilarious, first of all, but they also like made it a joke. They're like, you can't have this kid have tickle trunk on his jock strap. This is the show. This is the NHL. Get this guy a new jock. So I was like, Tink, did you actually get me a new jock? He's like, oh yeah, I had to get you a new jock. He said, I guess Mellenby and Lowry were the vocal supporters of giving me a new jock. So anyways, I thought that was hilarious. I thought I'd share that with you. He was trying to protect me by not bringing it up on the podcast, but I thought it was harmless enough. I don't even know where the tickle trunk came from, but the fact that the vets got a kick out of it and said that this is the best league in the world. We can't have guys in our team running around with tickle trunk on their junk. So anyways, thanks, Tink, for sharing that with me. Thanks for sticking around here till the end. Tink, if you are listening, or anyone who's related to Tink is listening, knows Tink as a person, you know what a great guy he is. And boy, what a fantastic person to have in your life. And he was a fantastic person to have in my life for my short time there with Florida. He made a challenging time being a rookie in the NHL and trying to find your way. He made that experience for me a lot easier and a lot more comfortable. So thank you to that, Tink. I know you made a difference in a lot of people's lives, a lot of players' lives going through there, and that's a testament to the relationships that you still have with those guys in that team and what those guys are willing to do for you. So remember, everybody, no matter what your job, no matter what you're doing, you have the ability to make an impact, a human impact, a positive impact, a memorable impact on somebody. And boy, I try to do that daily. I honestly do, is try to connect and try to make a difference. And if we can follow the example of Scott Tinkler, I think the world will be a better place. So thanks so much for listening. And until next time, play hard and keep your head up.